Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining today's SoCalRen Community-Based Design Collaborative Program Administrator Workshop. My name is Audrey Bragg, and I'm a Senior Program Manager with the Los Angeles County Internal Services Department, and I support the Southern California Regional Energy Network. So before we begin, a few quick notes. Today's session will be recorded and a copy will be shared afterwards. Please feel free to use the chat to submit questions or raise your hand at any point during the discussion. I'll start us off by providing an overview of the workshop purpose and background before transitioning to our speakers, who will walk through the structure and outcomes of the collaborative. Go ahead, next slide. Okay, so to begin, I want to briefly frame today's discussion. This workshop brings together program administrators and key partners to review the Community-Based Design Collaborative, or CBDC. The Commission directed SoCalRen to develop and pilot a process for designing the community-driven energy efficiency programs in coordination with other administrators that could ultimately inform the 2028-2031 portfolio cycle. The objectives today are to share the approach, are kind of twofold: to share the approach the SoCalRen and its partners use to design and implement the first collaborative, and to identify lessons and recommendations that might help share similar efforts in other regions. Actually, go to next slide. This is the directive. And at its core, this effort is about strengthening the connection between community insight and program design. It's also ensuring that energy efficiency and equity goals are informed by those closest to the work on the ground. Next slide. So here's a quick overview of today's agenda. We'll begin with an overview of how the collaborative framework was established. Then we'll discuss the process for identifying and engaging collaborative members. We'll review how the collaborative operated from meetings and proposal development to initiative design. And finally, we'll close with lessons learned and key recommendations for other PAs. Joining us today are three speakers who played a central role in shaping this effort. First is Natalie Espinoza. She's a collaborative co-facilitator, Elena Lee, a program coordinator, and Ivana Doran, a collaborative co-facilitator as well. Together, they will provide a comprehensive look at how this model came together and how it might inform future community-based design efforts. So with that foundation in mind, I will now hand it over to Natalie, who will walk us through how the collaborative was formed and how the members were identified. Thanks, Natalie.
Thank you, Audrey. All right. I'll go into establishing the collaborative framework here. Audrey already mentioned this, but the SoCalRen submitted its Community-Based Design Collaborative Tier 2 advice letter to the California Public Utilities Commission in compliance with the decision. The purpose of this advice letter was to provide recommendations related to the framework of the Community-Based Design Collaborative, and it outlined the structure of the first collaborative and informed the Commission on whether the concept should continue, how the compensation element should be structured, and what activities the collaborative should continue. So SoCalRen's alignment with the collaborative. Traditionally, programs have been designed at the higher level. This top-down approach often fails to capture the unique priorities of local communities, and as a result, programs may not fully address the regional challenges and opportunities that are in place for communities. With this collaborative, our aim is to shift toward a more community-informed model for energy efficiency program design. And by grounding program design with community collaboration, we can deliver solutions that are more relevant and equitable for communities. So the core objective of the SoCalRen Collaborative, our goal is to build a community-driven framework design. The scalable framework will help identify and fund locally focused energy programs. And to achieve this, we focused on our key objectives: facilitate discussions with CBOs to capture insights on equitable benefits, develop guidelines, tools, and processes that make community-driven design practical and actionable, strengthen the connections between the CBOs, public agencies, and funding sources to build lasting collaboration, and then learn directly from communities across the regions to understand local energy gaps and needs. So we wanted to achieve that overall alignment with the CPUC's ESJ action plan to improve the program administrator's ability to serve ESJ communities and remove barriers to access to clean, safe, and affordable utility services. In addition to this work that we did here, we worked closely with the Greenlining Institute. They were brought onto the team to advise on the development of the collaborative structure, the procedure, and equitable participation, fitting in with their role as a national nonprofit committed to building a just and equitable future, supporting under-resourced communities to develop capacity and lead their transformation. So from there, the key milestones of the collaborative, the process was designed to be clear, transparent, and accessible to CBOs. We walked CBOs through each step, partner with the SoCalRen to begin collaboration, share insights on the needs and priorities of their communities, review initiative parameters like program type, cost, and feasibility, submit proposals for initiatives that align with those parameters, and then, if approved, launch those initiatives and bring them to their communities. Now, what the program administrators and facilitators did for support was the following. We facilitated learning environments that build a high-level understanding of energy programs, regulatory structures, and funding processes. This was one of the most valuable aspects of the collaborative, as this was dedicated time spent on that foundational energy efficiency education that the CBOs were looking for. We provided that technical assistance and mentorship, plus offering one-on-one coaching, workshops, and guidance to help the CBOs shape program ideas into fundable proposals. Many organizations need that additional support navigating proposal requirements, budgeting, metrics, and partnership development. We also worked on creating the opportunities for the collaborative members to learn from each other. There is no other space that they have to discuss these opportunities so that they could share those best practices and co-develop strategies through regular meetings. We also were looking to allow that inclusive participation by compensating the collaborative members for their time, expertise, and engagement efforts. Stipends were essential in securing participation from smaller organizations. Then also having that administrative support to take on the roles of facilitation and meeting logistics so that collaborative members can focus on the engagement and innovation during these meetings. And then last, helping the collaborative members build relationships with implementers, technical partners, and local governments to strengthen the future implementation of initiatives and programs. As for timeline, as facilitators, I see, Luana, your hand's up.
Yeah, I just want to advocate for everybody that's attending, feel free. We want this an open, informal discussion. So if you have questions in between, don't feel like you have to wait to ask. We're happy to answer those as we go through the PowerPoint. Thanks.
Awesome. All right, scanning for questions. Okay, I'll jump into timeline. So as facilitators, SoCalRen guided the collaborative through a structured timeline to move from setup to program proposals. In phase 1, about 3 months, we established the collaborative objectives, defining scope, clarifying compensation models, and selecting target regions. Phase 2, about 5 months, we focused on identifying partners. This included researching local CBOs, creating engagement materials, conducting outreach, and finalizing participating organizations. For phase 3, we had about 6 months. We launched the collaborative meetings, facilitating discussions, providing technical support, and offering capacity building education to create that shared foundational knowledge. For phase 4, about 2 months, the community-based orgs led community engagement and a needs assessment, verifying their local priorities and sharing outreach resources. And then for phase 5, about 2 months, we supported program development and proposal preparation, including guidance on budget planning, metrics, and alignment with administrative goals. So the timeline ensured the collaborative moved step by step from vision to action.
Before we go on to the next slide, can you go back?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
I think what I want to highlight here is because, and the reason why I want to highlight is because my experience with the CAEC, I forget what it's called, the Equity Working Group, it's been a while. What we found successful and, learning from what initiatives weren't successful but had the same intent was identifying partners I think in the past when we've tried to be inclusive, what's happened is, best intentions ended up failing us because, maybe we have this idea that being inclusive means like opening the doors widely and, everybody will come. And what we found, through this is that really targeting and engaging, directly with CBOs, we've learned, that is a better approach because you'll quickly identify one, who has the capacity, two, who is a, let's say, viable partner, one that actually wants to participate and is actively, I would say, well suited for this type of collaborative, meaning like, they have the time, they have the mission, they have the kind of, I almost want to say the passion, right? Because as we all know, we're all super stretched, our bandwidth is short. And there are often times when we find, groups who are like, well, I don't have the capacity, this sounds great, but I just don't have the time, or I'm just, don't have the effort to give, and it would be to the detriment to your initiative. So this is something I wanted to highlight here based on this slide about identifying the partners, and then essentially trying to recruit them. So like a recruitment model. But just wanted to highlight that. But go for it, Natalie. Thanks.
Important to highlight. Thank you, Luana. Yeah. All right. So in prepping for kickoff and that CBO outreach, the team ensured that our objectives were clear so that we could also identify that stipend structure that would make the most sense, like Luana mentioned earlier. And then developing messaging and speaking points for community-based organization outreach, and then collecting leads and recommendations from our partners at Greenlining, as well as any other partners that we had that could help identify some good outreach that could be completed for identifying these partners. So in addition to all of our preparation, we also wanted to identify the potential barriers and what strategies we wanted to take to address what those barriers would be. So something we mentioned earlier was that historical compensation. We've learned from those past payment challenges that have been experienced by other groups looking to do similar work. And we wanted to use a milestone-based payment structure for predictability and a smoother cash flow for our community-based orgs. In addition to that, in-person attendance is difficult. So we were balancing that in-person connection with flexibility. We worked to have those chosen sites for in-person to fully support a hybrid meeting so that folks could fully participate both in that in-person space as well as online. We wanted to provide funding clarifications to avoid any confusion. We wanted to make sure we had shared messaging between all of the funding sources that we could be working with here. For CBOs, there is turnover happens, contacts change. And so to work through that, we made sure all of our materials were clear and easy to onboard new team members in case of that happening throughout the time of the collaborative. Program parameters, we defined what was in and out of scope early to keep the efforts focused and so that our meetings could be really spent on that deep work on what initiatives could make the most sense. Trust is really, really difficult. We implemented clear roles and communication processes with the community-based orgs to build that consistency and that confidence, and saw that we didn't lose that throughout the collaborative process. In addition, communication and language, we speak in a lot of jargon, especially in the energy efficiency world. So we wanted to start off strong by aligning on key terms and objectives so that everybody would be speaking the same language throughout the collaborative process. All right. From here, I will move into identifying the collaborative members. So we could talk a little bit here first about collaborative characteristics. We were very intentional with identifying the collaborative partners. We looked for mission alignments, partners with missions aligned with program objectives, not all having energy programming expertise, but interested in getting energy programming to their communities. Local presence, prioritizing organizations that have deep roots in the communities that they serve. For example, we have the Central California Asthma Collaborative that was headquartered in Fresno, but our collaborative member came from their Bakersfield office to help represent the needs that they have in Kern County. For capacity, we wanted to ensure that partners could commit to participate through the duration of the program. We'll be going through that timeline as you all saw. And then for the collaborative approach, we wanted to aim for meaningful and equitable participation with all of our collaborative members and making sure that they're able to participate in that. And then for references, SoCalRen was open to recommendations from potential partners from other CBOs as well, especially if we went to discuss with them the opportunity to join the collaborative and they let us know that it wasn't the right fit for their organization. We always ask them who they felt in their region would make more sense to make sure that they were still getting that representation. So here are our collaborative members. We have on this map exactly where everyone's headquarters was. We had 8 total CBOs join the collaborative with the intention of not having more than 10. We wanted folks to be coming to centrally convenient places for in-person meetings, and we felt the group process was more manageable with this size of this amount of community-based orgs participating, and also giving an opportunity for everyone to have the chance to speak up in a smaller group setting. We had fewer counties here so that we could have at least one initiative potentially be proposed for each one of these regions, and also give the opportunity for folks to work together. In working in these regions, we were also looking for the environmental justice areas of focus for the counties that we were working with. For Los Angeles County, we focused on the Eastern region, key population centers, including East LA, Pomona, and Lancaster, with dense, diverse communities with significant health and infrastructure needs. So the environmental justice concerns centering on that air pollution and asthma, largely driven by proximity to freeways and industrial zones. And these areas face those cumulative burdens that make equitable access to clean energy and healthier environments especially important. For San Bernardino County, with cities of San Bernardino, Ontario, and Victorville, they're rapidly growing inland areas with environmental justice challenges, including air pollution, asthma, and food access, all compounded by the warehouse growth and wildfire, and heavy truck density, and then the wildfire smoke increasingly affecting that air quality, adding to existing respiratory risks as well. For Ventura County, the key cities of Oxnard, Simi Valley, and Fillmore, the environmental pressures stem from the agricultural emissions, the wildfire smoke as well, and the unique needs of the farm worker communities. These communities benefit most from programs that would connect the cleaner energy solutions with health and economic resilience. And then for Kern County, with the population centers being Bakersfield, Delano, and Tehachapi, these areas facing the environmental justice concerns tied to oil drilling, refinery pollution, alongside the wildfire smoke and industrial emissions. So these conditions underscoring the need for the community-driven approaches that address the environmental and economic disparities. So we wanted to demonstrate those through lines for all of these counties so that they could come together to demonstrate the programs that were needed for their environmental justice communities. For the selected members of the collaborative and their mission focuses, we had close to 50 organizations that were considered for participating in the collaborative. And after outreach with the community-based organizations, the following organizations joined. We had the Central California Asthma Collaborative from Kern County with a focus on public health and environmental justice. The Community Action Partnership chapter in Kern County as well, for their main focus being on poverty alleviation and community service. We had Active San Gabriel Valley in Los Angeles County with their focuses on transportation, public health, and environmental justice. We had Day One, also Los Angeles County, with their main focus being public health. We had the Community Health Action Network in San Bernardino County, with their main focus being on public health and community engagement. We had the Central California Climate Justice Network from Ventura County, Climate Advocacy and Environmental Justice, as well as the Climate First organization, also from Ventura County, Climate Advocacy and Environmental Justice. And then lastly, the Ventura County Community Foundation from Ventura County, with their main focus being on fundraising and grant making. Right. Monitoring here. All right. So for the benefits for the CBOs when joining the collaborative, this was part of the discussion that we had with each of the collaborative members as we worked through that process of identifying them. We let them know that in joining the collaborative, the CBOs should consider the following factors. They would help to design a process for community-based energy program development. They'd get the opportunity to vocalize their opinions on the types of programs needed to fill those energy gaps for their communities. They would receive the recognition and promotion across the SoCalRen-wide network of stakeholders, and then they would be reimbursed for their time and sharing their experience. We also wanted to start off strong by having the collaborative members clear on what their expectations would be for participating. We requested one representative from each organization participate in the collaborative for continuity purposes. However, it was up to each of the CBOs to decide how to divide up the key responsibilities internally for participating in the collaborative. Each of the CBOs would be expected to attend the 5 meetings to provide direct support, input, and feedback for the collaborative goals. And the expectation is that this includes both the pre and post meeting preparation. If we had any homework for them, or if we had any materials that they could review ahead of time to come most prepared to our meetings. And then we asked them to support the solicitation of community feedback related to initiatives by completing either surveys or any other feedback type that they felt would work best for their community, all while upholding the cultural competency for their regions and have that inclusivity. All right. So we wanted to ensure the CBO participation and attendance in all of our meetings. So we had $2,000 stipend per meeting to cover any pre and post meeting coordination, any of that meeting participation, and travel and meal expenses. This was paid to each CBO after the meeting was completed and their attendance was verified. And then in addition to the meeting stipend, there was an additional optional compensation of $2,000 to contributions beyond meetings, such as regional outreach to other CBOs, collecting survey data, supporting tasks outside the regular meetings, and any other materials that they would need to review for us. Okay. So recommendations for future collaboratives in that outreach process: map the network, compile regional organizations list and any key contacts that there may already be. Engaging strategically, warm introductions work the best and should be prioritized, supplemented by that cold outreach. Building strong, lasting relationships, one-on-one presentations tailored to the organizational, to the community-based organizational's needs really helps to build the message for them, their participation, as well as sustaining that engagement, timely follow-up, and continued touch points to help answer any questions and break down those barriers so that the community-based orgs are ready to participate effectively in the collaborative. Some of the challenges and solutions we identified: low response rates. We leveraged the administrator's credibility to secure engagement and build upon existing relationships. There's a lot of trust barriers. We made sure to build the confidence with the community-based orgs through transparent goals, clear process, and defined outcomes. Really, the important part is to meet them where they are and provide them the resources for their most successful participation. And then that CBO engagement was really secured by offering that fair compensation for their collaboration. Right. And now I'll pass it on to Elena.
Thanks, Natalie. And before I move on, I'll just pause to see if there's any questions. It looks like we're pretty ahead of time. If none, oh, yes, is it Aisha?
Yeah, I was just curious. So, sounds like you all had a good solution to low response rates. I was wondering if by chance you all were able to get like the survey response rates from the CBOs as well as like what their session, their in-person session participation was.
Just trying to understand your question. Do you mean those surveys that were going out during CBO outreach, like us reaching out to CBOs to join the collaborative, or more so on CBO's efforts towards getting outreach from communities?
That, yeah,
Okay.
CBOs. Yeah, my
Yeah.
understanding was, maybe I misunderstood, but that the CBOs like issued surveys and did
Yeah.
in-person sessions. Yeah.
Yes. I'll get more into that later, but just quickly that yeah, each of the CBOs that did outreach, they provided those surveys, aligning them with different community events that they had going on. So there were some that were very successful in getting responses through their surveys, but also there were CBOs that used their own avenue channels of recurring meetings within their networks to also gain that feedback as well. So it was definitely a mix of feedback that was received during their outreach. Any other questions? All right. Well, again, my name is Elena. I'm going to go into this next section of our collaborative meetings and talk about, how these meetings were structured, our discussions and what we talked about, what the outcomes were, and really just how we use these meetings as a guide for these CBOs to design their own initiative program design. So we can go on to the next slide. And so we held a total of 5 meetings with collaborative members from January this year to June. And so we originally planned to kick things off with an in-person meeting in January, but due to the wildfires, we shifted to a virtual format to just ensure the safety of our collaborative members. But when we did have in-person meetings, like Natalie mentioned, we wanted to make sure that the meeting space was centrally located since we were covering these 4 different counties, and we chose to meet in Santa Clarita as a meeting point for us. And so we had 2 of those in-person meetings. And ahead of the meetings being kicked off, we had our meeting objectives mapped out just to make sure that everyone was aligned from the start. Along the way, we did make some adjustments to our agendas and topics based on feedback and what was most needed for the group. And so we can move on to the next slide and probably push forward. I'll go into meeting 1 on the next slide, actually. Thanks, Natalie. Okay. And so our goal for meeting 1 was really to help establish a shared understanding of energy efficiency fundamentals, and also just having a successful kickoff where folks felt comfortable being vocal in those meetings, offering their input and their expertise, and then also really just nailing down the alignment of the collaborative's purpose and objectives. Working with the Greenlining Institute, they advise that, during this first meeting, we listen more than we talk, which really shaped how we approach the rest of the meetings as well. So a big focus early on was giving the CBOs a space to introduce themselves, a share about, their organizations, their missions, the projects that they work on, all representing different mission areas and regions. And so we spent a lot of time facilitating, or fostering that environment for, shared understanding and where folks felt comfortable to speak out. And so from here, we acknowledge that the CBOs, given their diverse mission areas. We didn't assume that they all were experts on the energy space. And so we wanted to create a baseline knowledge of what they really needed to understand in order to propose different types of energy efficiency programs. And then also, we wanted to really highlight the key differences between energy efficiency and, what would be allowed within those programs. So not including any DER components as they're thinking about programs. Then on to meeting 2. Just to dive more into the types of energy efficiency programs that have been done. On the next slide, you'll see, our goal was to showcase some of the programs that have existed already. 2 of the SoCal REN implementers shared, joined the meeting and shared information on the programs with our Efficient San Gabriel Valley and Kids for Kids programs that offer really great examples of how programs can be designed around community needs. They walked through their success metrics, program activities, focus areas, which were primarily residential and educational. And so really the goal of this meeting was to identify and explore different program models that, see what can be done. We made sure that CBOs didn't feel like they had to replicate the programs that were presented during this meeting. We emphasize that, for them to think creatively, think outside of the box, just so that they were encouraged to really tailor to the unique needs of their communities. And then on to meeting 3. We talked more about program scopes and the impact areas that we wanted to, or that the collaborative members wanted to rank higher when looking at these types of programs. And so we can go to yep, you're on this slide, Natalie, thank you. So our discussion focused on why and how we measure program impact, looking at examples of common metrics and other ways to evaluate programs. And to support this conversation, we shared some additional reading materials about case study programs. We also included a whiteboard exercise. This was a virtual meeting. And so with this whiteboard exercise, we discussed and upvoted the impact areas that they felt were most important. And this really helped us shaping like what the community governance of evaluation criteria could look like. And so as we were talking through these different metrics, a couple of considerations came up, such as, the need for a clear methodology of collecting success metrics and, challenges around conveying that what makes a program impactful. Another concern that was brought up had to do with privacy and, what information would be collected by program participants, just to make sure that they would be willing to participate. So things like, we didn't want to collect sensitive information about like identity or, be considering how we're approaching collecting energy bill data. And so I'll share in the next slide of, what were the key program priorities and success metrics that came up. And so the top row here, accessible program services, equitable benefits, youth engagement, and workforce development were of the top impact areas that the CBOs wanted to see their programs touch. And so, for example, for accessible program services, they felt that these programs should be easy to access for everyone, whether you're a renter, homeowner, or small business. They also noted making sure that enrollment in programs were simple, and that there are also timelines of the programs that give communities enough time to engage and learn about these programs. As far as equitable benefits, wanting to ensure offering in-language materials, thinking about how outreach is done to make sure that they're reaching all of their community, and using trusted messengers to reach more people. And then as far as the youth engagement and workforce development, this theme focused on creating pathways for young people through education, training, and exposure to green careers. If there's some way to integrate sustainability in school programs and foster multi-generational engagement to build long-term community capacity. Still important, but not ranked as higher as the three that I just mentioned, but intentional outreach was also listed as a key impact area for these programs. And so making sure that there's dedicated program liaisons who can guide participants, clarify eligibility, and help them access multiple services. And then as for bill savings here, we talked about emphasizing the importance of transparent and verified energy savings paired with education to help residents better understand their bills. And then again, tracking savings in a way that maintains privacy while demonstrating real impact. All right, and then we can go into the next slide where we had 6 more impact areas that were brought up. And those include, reduce energy during peak times, energy efficient appliances, facilitation of weatherization, community knowledge and comfort with electrification and decarbonization, streamlined installation and permitting processes, creativity and innovation. And so, again, these are just a couple of factors that the collaborative members wanted to, see in these programs that are being designed, and that would be most relevant for their communities. Right. We can go on to meeting 4. And so meeting 4 was all about how we can prepare or providing resources and guidance for CBOs to, verify their community needs. So like I mentioned, the materials that were given were surveys. We even created a slide deck, multiple, and materials that were in multiple languages as well. We did Spanish and English. And so with these materials, the CBOs, we provided them, I think we gave them a 2-month timeline to go out into those community events, network spaces where they can collect that feedback. And so that is here, and that was just to verify, what their communities were voicing to them all this time, and the program impact areas that would be the most relevant to the communities that they serve. All right, and then in the last meeting, we go into the next slide. Thanks, Natalie. All right. And so for the last meeting, we really wanted to spend time working with the CBOs on developing those program initiative ideas that were informed by our past conversations and also the outreach that they did with their communities. And so how this meeting was laid out, we went into breakout groups based on their regional areas, just to make sure that the discussions were more focused, and each group shared their program ideas of what was coming up, giving everyone a chance to hear what others were working on and learning from different perspectives. We also wrapped up by talking about the collaborative process overall, how participants felt it went, what worked well, and what could be improved for future rounds of the collaborative. And then Again, I mentioned application support, to help participants move their ideas forward. We shared the template, and we even scheduled one-on-one meetings with each of the CBOs to walk through populating the application together. And so that hands-on support was really helpful for these CBOs that have limited capacity. One of the challenges that we wanted to work through was just managing expectations for these CBOs when they're submitting their initiative applications, especially around the amount of funding that would be available to fund these programs. And so there were a lot of questions about resources and scope. And so that was something that we saw as needed for clear communication early on. Overall, we can go on to the next slide. Overall recommendations as you think about structuring and planning for collaborative meetings. Well, we focus on careful planning for in-person meetings while also leveraging virtual engagement tools to make participation easier for everyone. As far as agenda and materials, we created agendas and meeting objectives in advance and make sure to provide those materials early on so that participants can come to these meetings prepared and, stay informed to, know what to expect coming into these meetings. And then as for feedback, we always provided additional opportunities for discussion and feedback so that everyone had a voice and contribute meaningful to the process. Everybody had different communication styles. Some CBOs were more vocal than others. And so as facilitators, we made sure to reach out to those and make sure that we were capturing all their ideas. All right. From there, we're going on to our next section of program and initiative design. So I believe I'm handing it over to Ivana.
Yeah, thanks, Elena. Before we move on, let's pause and see if there are any questions. There's nothing in the chat, but if anybody's thought of anything, feel free to chime in. If not, then we'll keep going, but feel free to raise your hand or enter anything in the chat and we'll address things as they come up. Natalie, I'll just let you know when the next slide comes around since you're screen sharing. But in this section, we'll review the process we undertook with our collaborative members to prepare energy program initiative proposals. So let's go on to the next slide, please. All right, so we started by creating a simple proposal application that asks for the idea specifics, including the initiative goal, the planned activities, the gaps that are going to be addressed, the targeted regions and communities, what types of experience the proposing CBO had with program implementation. Also, we wanted them to talk about how they plan to demonstrate impact and what metrics they would track. Finally, we asked them, very importantly, what budget they were seeking. Some of the CBOs knew exactly what they needed, and others needed help structuring the budget, which we provided. We started with the ideas that they had shared during our final collaborative meeting. And then, like Elena said, we followed up with a lot of one-on-ones with each of the CBOs to learn whether they wanted more support moving forward. And we structured the proposal around that, around their answers. If they did, we pre-populated as much as we could of the application and provided feedback to strengthen their proposal and support them. Let's go on to the next slide, please. All right, as mentioned earlier, the collaborative prepared the criteria. This was their discussion and their decision, and we reviewed the proposals with these in mind. These are summaries from some of their recommendations. The proposals may have a measurable energy component or an equity survey component or both. As Elena mentioned earlier, the collaborative also really discouraged data collection to prove savings where that data collection process was going to be too intrusive. So they were citing some sensitive trust relations with their communities, especially in current times, to be mindful of. They really emphasized co-design and community input, and so that was incorporated into the proposal application. Each proposal had to show how the idea was supported by the community being served, and then what methods of outreach were taken and how feedback was incorporated into that. The application stipulated that any CBO serving the region could apply. It wasn't just the members of the collaborative, so long as there was mission alignment and equity work being done, and they were serving that region, a CBO, a non-participating CBO could apply as well. But of course, they had to demonstrate a history of implementing programs and having those trusted networks in the community as well. And they had to track their metrics and progress if approved. Let's go on to the next slide. Okay, any approved program initiative would have to show progress and submit reporting. So we would develop a monthly report, which would accompany monthly invoices, and we would start with likely weekly check-ins to support launch and implementation and review progress towards goals together. But as was our goal with the application process here, it would be as well to keep the process simple and to maximize the CBO's ability to focus on the community work. So really we would try and help with the pre-population and troubleshooting of any sort. The facilitator really should bolster all of these admin requirements, including metrics tracking if needed, and especially if they require some CRM or tools that smaller CBOs just wouldn't have access to. The CBOs would be asked to provide any narratives, descriptions of events, and photos.
Karen, do you want to come off mute? We have a question, hand raised.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks. Really more from the last slide and also picking up on one of the things that you said earlier. But you said on the previous slide that one of the criteria was that it met equity or energy efficiency or both. And I think you said earlier that one of the things that you clarified in one of the meetings was the difference between SoCalREN and CPUC funding. So I'm wondering if you could just mention what were there multiple funding sources that were used for this? Is this all related to ratepayer funding? What is the how did that work?
Yeah, so this is all stemming from ratepayer funding, but I just want to make sure I'm answering your question properly. Are you referring to the development and facilitation of the collaborative or the next steps, the initiative proposal?
Well, I was just, it mentioned clarifying between SoCalREN and CPUC funding, so I was wondering if there were two sources of funding. So that was one. And then here where you said proposals may be designed to achieve equity goals, energy efficiency goals, or a combination of both. Mm-hmm. If something is doing only equity but not energy efficiency, I was wondering if there was a source of funding other than ratepayer funds.
Yeah, I think Ivana, I think that slide, and this is in the first chapter. Sorry, this is Luana Medina. I totally see what you're talking about because I also had that comment, Karen, on that slide because it looks confusing. No, this is all ratepayer funding. Really what the clarification was like on what the funding specifically for the CBDC was given, and then of course what SoCalREN portfolio funding is. So not necessary clarification on ratepayer funding, but like SoCalREN is authorized a portfolio that it is currently implementing on the last business plan application decision, but we have been designated a discrete pot of money, let's say, for this particular initiative. So that's what that statement had to do with, we could definitely be more clear on that. So I'll have the team update that slide because I can see how that can be confusing. So that's the delineation. And then on the equity and or energy efficiency goals, we're really talking about, and we can be more clear on this, is claimed energy efficiency and equity. So for instance, and we'll talk a little bit about some of these applications we received, you know, they really emphasized engagement and outreach, right? I mean, engagement, education, excuse me, and outreach, right? Whereas you may not see a direct impact in energy efficiency, right? Where you're like installing a measure, but there's still a relatable impact about energy efficiency as far as, you know, educating and outreach, but not necessarily claiming any kind of savings that could be attributed to that initiative. So we'll be more clear on this slide, but I think you raise a really good question for clarification. So thank you.
Yes.
Hope that helps. Sorry.
Yeah.
That addresses, yeah.
Yeah, any further questions on this slide or any of the previous content? All right. Okay, so we can, yeah, we covered the slide. We can go ahead and go on to the next, please. Great, thank you. We were really happy with the outcome of the application process. You know, going into it, we weren't sure who was going to be ready or willing to submit some proposals, but applying it for the first time with the collaborative and the first cohort of CBOs was a success. All of the 4 regions represented that are covered by these initiative proposals, and 7 out of the 8 participating CBOs in the collaborative participated in the proposal process as well. So there were 5 proposals that were submitted in total, with 2 CBOs pairing together to represent the San Gabriel Valley region of Los Angeles County, and then 2 CBOs pairing to represent Ventura County, the remaining submitted solo proposals. And as we mentioned earlier, and we can't stress it enough, we provided a lot of one-on-one support to get these proposals to the finish line. And it was exactly the type of support that many of these CBOs needed. Some are very, very small, have little capacity, and this was crucial for them to gain entry into the energy program proposal space. These 5 initiatives, if approved and funded, would go a long way to helping SoCalRen reach far and wide across this vast territory with energy programs. And so yeah, we hope that they are approved and funded and go far. But we can go into the next slide and detail some of that process. All right.
Ivana,
Luana.
it looks like Luana has her hand up.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Laura.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify on the hand holding, you know, for the other PAs is, of course, you know, as an administrator, we are, you know, always, you know, conducive of the idea that, you know, ratepayer funding, one is siloed, and then of course, all the compliance requirements that go along with it. So we really saw our role as kind of like advisors as they were developing their initiatives, you know, like what's allowable, what's not allowable. And then also like an understanding of, you know, the different categories of types of initiatives that are available through ratepayer funding, and that. So I just wanted to add to that because I think, you know, that's often a question. You may get communities that are like, well, why can't you do this? This seems like something that we should be doing, but understanding that, you know, we work within a regulated funding pathway, I guess. I don't know if that's the right term, but yeah. So I just wanted to add that.
Oh, thank you. That's a good point. to add for sure. All right, and this is just a graphic representation. As proposed, the initiatives would actually span 10 counties. They can be scaled to be smaller initiatives, which would probably be more manageable at first, and then they can be scaled up and out if proven successful after the first round. All right, we can go to the next slide, please. All right, we'll wrap up here with this last section and then talk about what's up next. Next slide. Yeah. All right, the next steps that we can foresee are first to support our CBO members of the initial collaborative. So if funded and approved, our goal would be to support the CBOs in implementation, admin, marketing, everything needed to make their initiative successful in the community, to give them that capacity to do the work. Next, the goal would be to continue the collaborative structure with a new cohort of CBOs and serving new regions in need. We detailed all of the successful practices, and now we would just need to follow them in subsequent collaboratives while remaining flexible for any customization as needed. We need to institutionalize this framework, which is our recommendation. And to do that, we apply all of the best practices, including, importantly, the milestone-based compensation. But following those payments, it's the expectation that funded initiatives would be the only compensation afterwards with the implementation of proposals. We can move forward, please. All right, here we've listed out some key recommendations based on our experience developing and facilitating this first collaborative. So first and foremost, it should be centered around equity during the start and during each phase. We did a lot of research to justify the selected regions to target and to support with attention to their most underserved communities. As we stressed a lot, compensation was essential. These CBOs are the experts, but they can't do the work for free. And it's fair to say that most could not have participated without stipends. We remove participation barriers with virtual and hybrid meetings, accessible in-person meetings, and a structure that's going to allow quiet voices to be heard as well. We support capacity building, offer technical assistance, energy education, again, lots of one-on-one follow-up and space for Q&A, and also the space for peer-to-peer learning and networking too. We look to streamline and simplify the proposal process as much as possible. Our application was short and manageable, and we helped wherever needed. Again, the pre-populated. It was open and accessible to our collaborative CBOs and more broadly to other CBOs in their networks as well, if they chose to participate. We're recommending to follow a flexible 18-month timeline. Again, there's a lot of research to be done. There's an outreach and ramp-up phase to be done initially with the CBOs, and then it's a balance between keeping momentum and slowing it down as needed to ensure that concepts are understood and things of that nature. But again, most importantly, remaining flexible based on the needs of the collaborative and giving them the space to express their needs. And then, of course, we scale what works. The framework itself is very scalable and should now be applied to other regions and communities in needs. And so it's our recommendations that RENs lead this as part of their gap filling efforts, with support, of course, from CCAs and utilities. We can go into the next slide, please. We developed a toolkit that we're going to be sharing with all of the great tools and templates that we prepared and used during this first collaborative. It's going to include all of the outreach resources used at the beginning to reach out to prospective CBOs and ask them to join the collaborative, and all of the presentations and exercises that we used during the collaborative meetings themselves. It's also going to include those community outreach surveys that were prepared, any flyers as well. The proposal application tool will be part of it. And then, of course, all of this culminated in an advice letter to the Public Utilities Commission that was filed with our recommendations based on the first collaborative. We'll follow up with those materials and that comprehensive toolkit for you to use. Let's go on to the next slide, please. All right, and then as a next step, we're really going to be focused on preparing another advice letter, and this time about the initiative proposals themselves. The goal is to have these reviewed and hopefully PUC approved so we can give our CBOs the full green light to move forward with all of them. And this is just a photo of our collaborative during its final meeting in Santa Clarita. I believe our last slide is, if you can move forward.
Ivana,
now.
let me clarify on that advice letter.
Yeah.
So this advice letter is also as directed by section 8.3 in the business plan decision. And apologies, I can't remember off the top of my head the number. I should be able to at this point, reading it about 100 times. But it also directs SoCalRen to file this advice letter, not only to support these initiatives, but also as a market support segment program that we'll be requesting. So the community-based design collaborative, the plan for SoCalRen is to actually make this a program where we continue these kind of cohort strategy of developing community-based initiatives, and we administer them throughout the performance period of our portfolio. So that advice letter will detail how that will work, have all the necessary new program details that are required by the Tier 2 advice letter directive that the CPC has. So that is forthcoming, trying to get things out as fast as possible. But yeah.
Do you have an idea of the timing of that, Milana?
Well, you know, I was hoping by the 15th, but I'm looking at my calendar and that might be tight, but my hope was, because we have all the information, we were essentially going to put it in the September 30th advice letter, but reading the decision over, we realized we were supposed to do 2 separate advice letters. So now we're just we pulled that information out, and so now we're just pairing it in the new program Tier 2 advice letter. So right now the team's just making sure we have all the necessary pieces that are required for a new program Tier 2 advice letter. But yeah, our hope is the 15th, but you know, I may be being optimistic, but that's my hope. Yeah. But essentially it's a lot what we've talked about today, and you know, it's just detailing how we're going to do this kind of cohort annual process, and then how we'll roll out the initiatives, how they will be funding. We won't be asking for any new funding, so we're going to use existing authorities because we have it. And yeah, and then it's going to discuss the initiatives. You know, one thing I wanted to highlight, we didn't go into details into those initiatives, but you know, we got 5 really solid applications and only 4 will be funded. Correct, Ivana? And the
Yes.
reason being is, you know, so it kind of went, we didn't go into detail about the approval process, but the collaborative got it, they reviewed it, they kind of gave their evaluation. Then it went up to the administrator, which is SoCalRen or LA County. We reviewed them. We looked at, you know, their budgets. We looked at, you know, what were they proposing? Because of course we were like, is it allowable, not allowable? And one particular initiative, which was really good initiative, it's just unfortunately current policy would not support it. And I could give you guys I'll talk a little bit about it, but just to give you an example, was, they were looking to do a gap filling program, which is amazing because, RENs are all about gap filling. But they were looking to support remediation type of measures. And the reason being is because what we find in low income programs such as LIHEAP, they, once you get an audit and then they go in to actually apply those measures, like let's say a light bulb, they're going in to install it and they see a little bit of water damage, they will literally stop that project right there. So that customer, even though they've been through the audit, they've agreed, they've enrolled and committed, the LIHEAP program will literally stop work and no longer support that customer. And what we're seeing is in programs such as those, participants are systematically being failed and thus do not want to participate in our public purpose programs because they're like, why would I try again if I've already felt defeated because you had me hopeful that you could, retrofit my, let's say, unit or home, and now you've walked away. And I have no, course of, corrective action, right? And so, this particular community organization, we thought this is a great idea. We do need this in our programs. I know ESAP does do a little bit. I think I've spoken to that team and they're like, okay, yeah, if there's like one window broken, we can fix it. But it's a relatively small amount of remediation. And it doesn't include things like that, right? Water damage or asbestos, things like that. So really thinking through about like, what are community members seeing? What do they really need? Are we developing policies and programs that meet that need? And I was really, just taken back as an administrator and being like, this organization really saw a gap and they found something that would be really significant because think about all of those LIHEAP customers that could have been supported and who are now not going to be. And it was a relatively small amount. I think it was going to be less than 200K. And they would have had an impact of over like, I don't know, 400 homes or so. It was relatively small amount for relatively high impact that would support an existing program that, LIHEAP is a great program, right? Except for the policies that cause barriers to implementation. But, here was somebody that really had a thoughtful idea. And unfortunately, due to policies, we could not green light. But we're going to work through that. I definitely say you may see things in our business plan application that address what we're seeing in communities and how we can support their implementation of energy efficiency. So I just wanted to highlight that because I thought it was a really good example of what communities are bringing to us and how we have to sometimes say no. But they weren't upset about not getting their initiative funded, but they really appreciated this opportunity to actually, discuss the issue. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Hopefully it's a not never, but not now conversation. All right. Are there any other questions or thoughts or feedback?
Hi, Ivana. I'm Jessie Levine from Energy Division. Is this an all right time?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So fantastic presentation. I had a question about funding, and so maybe this goes back to Karen and then Luana's response, but I'm looking back at the business plan, the application decision 2306055. And so it sounds like one of the wonderful things that was done was compensating the participants of the collaborative, and it was really helpful to outline exactly how much. Was there a budget for the collaborative itself getting up into sort of the last June meet? And I'm seeing in the decision that I understand that there's 1.5 million to be supplemental to SoCalRen's budget. These are just general questions, not that I'm in charge of anything here, but I just want to wrap my head around the budgets. Happy to repeat if helpful.
No, yeah, I can start us off, Luana. Feel free to chime in, of course. But yes, that was the allocation for the collaborative itself, and then You know, there were smaller expenses like refreshments and things of that nature, but the stipends were provided for each of the CBOs after for each of the meetings, and it was a simple MOU process. But yeah, that was the funding that was leveraged for the whole collaborative for phase one.
Great. Was there a max budget? And then is the 1.5 for the resulting initiatives? 1.5 million?
Well, I can speak to that, Ivana. And then you could give the amount for the stipends, the total budget that we allowed, because I can't remember off the top of my head.
There was a slide to it.
Yeah. Why don't you look that up and then you could give it out to this team. So, see, to your latter question about funding the initiative. So in the subsequent advice letter that we're hoping to get filed next week, we'll have an isolated budget. So what we're seeing, I can't remember what 2026 we're going to request, if it's almost 800,000 in initiatives, and then we'll budget subsequently from there what we anticipate each year. I will give you all this advice as a program administrator. What we do see with community-based organizations, like they may forecast a budget based on what they believe. However, sometimes there's a ramp-up period, and so they'll have challenges spending to that forecasted budget. So we'll see like, okay, I, didn't utilize all my money for whatever reason, could be capacity, FTEs. So even as they forecast their budgets, I've never actually in my experience see them be able to spend to that within a given, like if it's just a short time frame, it would be too challenging. So what we tend to do is, as they're implementing an initiative, and I only know this because of our regional partner initiative, is, we'll discuss with them like what support services they need to help them, get to their effort, right? Or to their outcome. And so that tends to vary. So even if, like, let's say what we put in the advice letter is, and it'll be very small amounts, because again, these are small organizations. They don't have like a large implementer capacity. So the budgets will look small, but they can have high impact. So you'll see that for every year. And then of course, with the authority to carry over, we work with them to, let's say if their performance period is 18 months, we'll work with them to help implement. Like maybe they need capacity and we'll provide FTEs to help them get to where they need to be. And then we'll start seeing their spend ramp up, right, as they build capacity. But I don't have the number off the top of my head right now, but it will be in the advice letter, Jesse. And it is carryover funding that SoCalRen had from 2024, because we took so long to procure some of our programs, which actually ended up being a blessing in disguise. I like to think there is a silver lining over every cloud. And so that money we were able to identify as funding that can support this cohort and any next cohorts over 2026 and 2027.
Thanks, Luana. Thanks, everyone.
And Natalie helped us toggle back to the stipend details. Any additional questions or thoughts? All right, it's looking like, the final slide. If you have any thoughts or questions afterwards, please contact Audrey, who kicked us off for this workshop.
Sebastian has a question, Ivana.
Oh yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, I unless you guys are wanting to wind down, I could always
No, go for it, Sebastian.
Go for it.
So this is a very high level question. So I'm trying to sort of understand this framework in the context of say a traditional 3P relationship where we have a third party implementer of a program. by analogy, would this be similar to that, but instead of sort of a private entity being the 3P implementing the program, we're actually asking a CBO to do that. Just trying to sort of understand sort of the dynamics of a 3P versus here, and how they would relate. Obviously, there's some different dynamics that apply. But like oversight, I know you guys talked about reporting and some of the other sort of, I would say, contractual aspects. So if you can share some thoughts on that, that would be appreciated. Again, I'm trying to sort of understand the dynamics of how this works relative to sort of that traditional 3P model.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question, Sebastian. So it is similar in the 3P model. You know, SoCalRen enters into a memorandum of understanding with these organizations. So we enter into MOU. They have performance metrics which they must meet, and we work with them to help them meet that. I think the only difference really with the third-party implementer model is really the trusted partner, right? So you're utilizing a trusted partner within the community to, you know, develop the design, meaning they understand what the local community needs are, and then also their boots on the ground, and you're paying them for that boots on the ground work, right? Essentially, I think what I've found in third-party implementation, and 95% of my portfolio is third-party implemented, is, you know, not all implementers are boots on the ground. Many have this kind of one-step approach, or they're one step removed from the community, but they're, you know, they're contracted to serve all those communities, and yet they don't necessarily reflect all of those communities. So this type of programming model really helps to gain that local presence that is often missing, and also to give that trusted understanding of communities to community members themselves. So I like to think of it as a more improved third-party implementation model, because it has that. But, you know, the only problem is with this type of program model, you can only do it at small scale, right? Whereas like if you have a third-party implementer model, you could do it in a much larger scale, but it's just more standardized and more removed from each community because it's so standardized. I guess that's what I would say.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. I appreciate you sharing your insight here.
Sarah, go for it.
I'm sorry, just on that topic, I am curious, since we're kind of going down this first 3P implementation. I think it's an interesting model to sort of like, you had the CBO's design sort of in some ways the criterion. Obviously, you guys did some review of the applications as well, which is great. But after the advice letter is filed that sort of recommends these initiatives, and this is just and I'm not sure if there already is like a plan or guidance. Is there additional sort of review or approval or like peer review groups or like other sort of hoops that are anticipated? Or is it more like this process sort of constitutes that hoop?
So this process, I would say, constitutes that hoop, and I love that you use that analogy. But I will say that, you know, the only way these CBOs are going to be successful, Sarah, is if, as the administrator, we are like, kind of, I like to think of it as like their mentor, right? Like we're with them. That's why Ivana mentioned we'll have like monthly meetings with them and talk about like, okay, what's the progress? You know, we help them set up dashboards and say, okay, what have you accomplished? You know, and, you know, sometimes they'll be like, oh, we're not getting any movement. And we'll be like, okay, let's come up with some new strategies and tactics. What can we do? Your model is good as far as, you know, what your objective is, but maybe you're just not utilizing the right tools or the right communication campaigns or whatever it be, right, of the tactic. And it's really, guiding them through the process and finding out. And I can tell you, if there are models that are unsuccessful, I mean, that's a lesson learned. I never look at failures as a way of like, oh, that's it. We made a big mistake and this is I really look at it as like, okay, well, if that didn't work, then now we know, right? Like you don't know until you try it. And so it's really just a kind of mentor-mentee process across the period of performance of their initiative. And, we've actually done this already in our portfolio with our regional partners. So our regional partners, they're kind of like, well, I don't like to say they're like the old local government partnerships. In fact, they're 1,000 times improved than the old LGPs. But they are also, we have a program that allows them to pilot initiatives. They also go through an application process. They have specific budgets allocated, and they're able to implement in their communities. And what we've found is, we still have that mentor-mentee relationship. We work with them, they work with us. They also help us build a lot of pipeline. I have to give it up to the regional partners. If it wasn't for them, a lot of our programs wouldn't be as successful as they are today. So we've kind of built this really great relationship of, we're helping you build trust and impact in your communities, and you're helping us as an, SoCal REM portfolio build out our pipeline and meet our goals and targets. And so I see this program in the same way, right? Because I'm going to tell you right now, our team, the administrators, the SoCal REM administrative team, we've been going out to these communities, like 5-hour drives, 3-hour drives. And what we're seeing is, as we go into these communities and meeting with them, like we're meeting with, the county of Inyo, we're meeting with different tribe members, and we're actually in person talking with them, and we're finding out how there's so many gaps in the market and how they're not being met. But I mean, there's no way, my very little staff of 12 can do this all the time, right? So we really need to rely on these partners like community-based organizations, regional partners to give us this advisement and insight, or we're not going to be impactful. It's all just going to be, for fodder, right? Like we're saying, oh yeah, we're doing great. But are we doing great when we walk into these communities? What we're finding is, hey, you're doing okay, but you could do this, this, and this. This is what we're seeing. And, it's until we talk to those communities, we don't find this out. And so, we're going out to Central Valley, to the coast, to all the way. I think one of our next big outings is to Imperial County. A lot of people don't talk about Imperial County, but they are a part of the SoCalGas territory. They're ratepayers. And they're one of the most underserved, overlooked counties. So that just gives you an example. Like we really believe in this model. We're hoping all the PAs do something, even if you just take a piecemeal of whatever you learned today. I think that is a win, and we're happy to give you everything that we have, and we don't want you to we don't want you to have to work harder. Hey, it's all about working smarter, right? Take what we've developed, do what you would like, edit it, and do something great that's really impactful in all of the communities in California. We're really diverse. That's one great thing. I'm happy and proud to be a part of California. So hope that answered your question, Sarah.
Yeah, that was helpful. Thank you.
All right. I guess that was the last one, Ivana.
Wonderful. So yeah, we will share the slides, the recording, and the toolkit content. So you'll have a lot of resources to dig through. If you come up with any questions, please utilize the email, or Audrey's email there, to reach out, and we'll be happy to continue the conversation. Thank you, everybody, for your time. And Luana, Audrey, any last words to close us out?
No, thank you to you all as well.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye.
Have a good one.